everyone, this is People in Power, and I'm Summer El-Shahad. On today's program, oil got in gains.
Nous, on ne comprend pas. On voit seulement que nous, on a vendu tant de pétrole, tant de milliards. On va faire tel projet, mais nous, on n'a jamais vu ça.
Congo-Brazzaville is one of the poorest countries in the world, despite the fact that it produces nearly 300,000 barrels of oil a day. The president, Denis Sassou Nguesso, has been in power for all but 5 of the last 30 years. And earlier this summer, he put himself up for re-election and won another 7-year term. He's long been suspected of siphoning off large portions of the country's oil revenues. But suspicion only turned to proof when documents produced in an English court showed that oil belonging to the state had financed his son's spending sprees in Hong Kong, Paris and Barcelona, and his own stays in luxury New York hotels. Many of Congo-Brazzaville's 4 million people are enraged. Why should the wealth from the country's precious natural resources be spent on luxury for a few when most of the population live on less than $1 a day? But as Christopher Walker and Andrew Weir report, the proof of the misuse of oil funds came from an unpopular source.
In July's election in Congo-Brazzaville, there was only one serious contender, the current president, Denis Sassou Nguesso. For years, the president and his family have been suspected of diverting hundreds of millions of dollars of the country's oil revenues into their own pockets.
You have to ask yourself, what's going on here when 70% of the population lives in extreme poverty, and that means extreme, less than $1 a day, and yet the country is a big oil exporter.
On demande à notre président, il pousse à avoir notre souci à nous, cette génération est vraiment foutue, parce que nous, on n'a pas de boulot.
Congolese citizens were looking for answers, which came from some unexpected places.
The president of one of Africa's poorest countries spent $400,000 on hotel bills in 2 short visits to New York last year. Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of Congo, also known as Congo-Brazzaville, stayed twice at the Waldorf Astoria. On one visit, his entourage occupied 44 rooms and ran up a bill of $252,000, some of it spent on pricey champagne and other expensive beverages.
The spending habits of Congo's president were leaked by Elliott Associates, a secretive New York hedge fund. Elliott had bought some of Congo's foreign debt and was hunting down the country's assets worldwide. Hedge funds that do this have come to be known as vulture funds. The story broke in the British paper The Sunday Times.
Vulture funds do hover looking for opportunities. In this particular case, the issue was bad debts. Debts can be turned into commodities that can be bought and sold. Elliott Associates bought the debt from some French banks. So these were legitimate debts, and there were court orders ordering the Congo to pay up. And Elliott had gone after them. The Congo had the money to repay these debts, but it wasn't doing so. It was selling its oil through a series of sham companies to disguise its origins.
Elliott Associates obtained details of the personal spending of President Sassou Nguesso and his family. Oil cargoes were apparently being sold by companies in tax havens secretly owned by the president's son, Denis Christel, head of Congo's state oil sales company, COTRADE.
He uses Anguilla, a British tax haven, to establish a company, and he hides his beneficial ownership. He puts his kind of ownership of the company into trust with others. Then that company in Anguilla opens an account with a major bank in Hong Kong, and then Denis Christel gets a credit card with that bank and goes shopping. And he spends thousands of dollars on designer goods.
Global Witness, an anti-corruption group, published Denis Christel's credit card bills on its website. He then sued to get the documents removed from public view and lost. A High Court judge in London ruled that on the basis of the documents, Denis Christel and his company were unsavory and corrupt. The profits of COTRADE's oil sales should go to the people of the Congo, not to those who rule it or their families.
So at one point in 2005, in 1 month, he spends about $35,000 on designer goods for himself, as I said, paid from Congo's oil money. That money would vaccinate 80,000 children in Congo-Brazzaville for measles, which is a major cause of child mortality.
With the public revelations of the misuse of oil revenues, activists in Congo have been calling for an end to the support given by Western governments, the IMF and World Bank to President Sassou Nguesso.
Ça peut paraître complètement fou quand on regarde la population du Congo et les ressources pétrolières qu'a ce pays, mais c'est un pays pauvre, très endetté. C'est-à-dire que 2 tiers de la population vit en dessous du seuil de pauvreté. Et l'espérance de vie est de l'ordre de 45 ans au Congo. Le Congo est un scandale, le Congo, tout simplement.
An increasing number of Congolese are fed up.
Nous, on ne comprend pas. On voit seulement que nous, on a vendu tant de pétrole, tant de milliards. On va faire tel projet, mais nous, on n'a jamais vu ça.
Alors que le pays est vachement riche. On a le pétrole, on a tout ici. Le Congo est vachement riche.
Christian Munseo heads a campaign to bring about transparency to oil revenues so Congolese citizens can track where the money has gone.
Au Congo, il y a des conflits simplement parce que les dirigeants politiques sont à la quête de la confiscation des revenus pétroliers. Ceux qui contrôlent les revenus pétroliers contrôlent le pouvoir et ceux qui contrôlent le pouvoir contrôlent les revenus pétroliers. Ceux qui les détiennent peuvent asseoir des pratiques clientélistes pour s'acheter avec les revenus pétroliers une clientèle politique et qui finalement empêche que les dits revenus soient redistribués pour le service du développement.
Since 2003, when the IMF began its program with Congo-Brazzaville, auditors have uncovered gaps of hundreds of millions of dollars between what the state oil company, the SNPC, has been paid and what the finance ministry has received.
1998, lorsque le Congo-Brazzaville décide de créer une société qui s'appelle la Société nationale des pétroles du Congo, qui est une société publique qui a pour mission de vendre le pétrole congolais pour le compte de l'État. L'objectif étant de s'émanciper de Total et des compagnies pétrolières qui jusqu'ici commercialisaient le pétrole dans la plus totale opacité. Sur le papier, c'est une bonne idée, sauf que la SNPC est devenue la boîte noire du régime.
But such allegations did not stop the president from claiming his country was too poor to meet its financial commitments and pleading with the World Bank and the IMF to get Congo's massive foreign debt cancelled.
Congo was, like other countries seeking debt relief, very poor. But unlike the others, it was a big oil exporter. It turns out that no one kept track of where those revenues were going. And it was quite clear that they were ending up in the pockets and bank accounts of people that didn't deserve it.
With Congo's continued secrecy about its oil accounts, it was expected that the IMF and the World Bank would refuse to grant the country debt relief. The outcome, however, was even a surprise to the bank's president, Paul Wolfowitz.
That's what this was about. It was about getting transparency as to where the money was going so that there could be, hopefully, more of it would go to the people that needed it, to the poor people. And you have no idea how much resistance I ran into. I was accused of singling out Congo and discriminating against it and setting a special standard for them. And my view was, I'm not setting a special standard for them. This same standard ought to apply to any country that wants debt relief and that has large oil revenues. They ought to be accountable.
Paul Wolfowitz lost the argument. In spite of the World Bank's stance against corruption and waste, they went ahead with Congo's admission to the debt relief program.
Well, you know, Congo-Brazzaville is currently running a program toward the HIPIC. And the HIPIC is the highly indebted countries, poor countries program. And for that program, there are a lot of prior actions that you have to take as a country. There are benchmarks that you have to attain. And a huge portion of it is on the governance issues.
They're too quick to go to the argument that, well, even if a lot of it is siphoned off, some of it goes to poor people. And that argument to me fails on 2 counts. Number one, how about sending more of it to the countries where all of it goes to poor people? It's not like this money grows on trees and there's an abundance of it. But secondly, at a certain point, that siphoning really undermines the fabric of a country, and it empowers people who are not interested in the public welfare.
La communauté internationale avait un levier extrêmement fort pour contraindre le Congo à faire la transparence sur ses recettes pétrolières, avec cette carotte qui était l'annulation de dette. Aujourd'hui que le Congo est rentré dans ce processus, que ça a gelé tout le service de la dette, on n'a plus cette carotte. Et donc le Congo peut continuer comme ça pour durer et continuer à détourner énormément d'argent.
After the break, Congo-Brazzaville's president fights back against the Vulture Fund. Hello and welcome back. Vulture funds are hedge funds which specialize in buying at massive discounts loans made to poor countries which were never repaid. The fund then sues the poor country for the full amount of the debt plus compound interest, often amounting to double or triple the original loan. Hence the name Vulture Funds. It was Elliott Associates, a so-called vulture fund, that first revealed how Congo-Brazzaville's first family spent the country's oil revenues on mansions and luxury goods. Christopher Walker and Andrew Weir continue their report.
Under pressure from the bad publicity, President Sassou Nguesso made a confidential out-of-court settlement with Elliott Associates, the so-called Vulture Fund. To protect against future Vulture Fund attacks, he launched a campaign in Washington to get all Vulture Funds declared illegal.
Congo-Brazzaville has pretty much been the lead country in Africa here in Washington in trying to push forward legislation that would basically take some harsh action against vulture funds. They've basically hired a number of different law firms, lobby groups, PR shops. A draft circulated by lobbyists was asking anyone who operated a vulture fund to do 5 years of prison. They tried to get ambassadors from various developing world countries to kind of join together in a letter writing campaign to members of Congress and saying vulture funds are a huge threat to our way of governing our countries. You're talking about a campaign that's gone into the millions of dollars.
These documents, lodged with the US Department of Justice, show that President Sassou Nguesso's lobbying campaign has cost nearly $6 million so far. The money was paid by Congo's state oil company, the SNPC, out of Congo's oil revenues. A prime target for the campaign was Congresswoman Maxine Waters. President Sassou Nguesso's lawyer and main lobbyist in the US, John Richards, helped draft the bill that Representative Waters is guiding through Congress.
I have introduced the Stop Vulture Funds Act because for over 10 years, I've been working on debt relief for poor countries. This act will stop predators from coming in and buying up that bad debt. Those people who would make money off the backs of poor countries this way, they're the bad people. Our conditions would attempt to exclude from protection dictators who are known to be stealing, to be undermining the possibility of development and protection for their own people. We would exclude them.
Now, it's the vulture funds that say that this particular bill was initially promoted by one such dictator, specifically the president of Congo-Brazzaville, Denis Sassou Nguesso, that he paid for lobbyists to get this to start the process towards this legislation?
I don't know that to be true, but time will prove everything. And if we discover that there are conspiracies of undesirable leaders who are attempting to do this, we'll handle it. But I don't know that to be true.
Congo-Brazzaville has now promised to tell the truth about how it spends its oil revenues. As part of the debt relief process, the country signed up to a new international program, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, or EITI, an initiative supported by the IMF and the World Bank. Florent Michel Okoko is Congo-Brazzaville's official representative.
Une des exigences du Fonds monétaire international, de la Banque mondiale et des autres partenaires au développement, c'était la transparence, la bonne gouvernance, notamment dans le secteur pétrolier. Donc ce qui a amené l'État à passer par des conditionnalités assez fermes qui obligeaient la certification des recettes pétrolières, qui obligeaient l'audit des coûts pétroliers, qui obligeait l'audit de la Société nationale des pétroles du Congo, qui est la société qui, entre autres, commercialise le brut du Congo.
But back in Congo, there is no evidence of proper spending of oil revenues, making Christian Munseo question the country's commitment to real financial reform.
Je suis originaire de cette région, au bord de la mer, cette région qui produit les ressources naturelles, particulièrement le pétrole, ce dont il est question. Et je suis donc un témoin privilégié de ce fossé qui existe entre les revenus liés à l'exploitation de cette ressource naturelle qu'est le pétrole et la vie des communautés ici, particulièrement, mais la vie des Congolais en général.
Not only do these communities see no material benefits from the oil, but they say even its extraction has made their lives worse. Onshore drilling has left a trail of environmental destruction. Loango, Congo's first onshore oil field, was established in 1957. Local people blame it for contaminating their drinking water.
On continue toujours à souffrir. Il y avait beaucoup de production, des gros manioc, patates, il y avait tout. Il y a eu cette exploitation. On n'en trouve plus. Déjà la rivière, la source est partie. Il n'y a plus rien. Avant, on se contentait même de notre eau de pluie, mais maintenant, ce n'est plus le cas. Même l'air que nous respirons, l'air n'est plus bon par rapport à cette torchère-là.
Near the massive French-built oil terminal of Geno, people blame gas flares for ruining their crops.
La crainte, c'est parce que durant la présence du terminal ici, tout est pollué chez nous. Au fil du temps, nous nous sommes rendus compte que c'est la torche qui fait que la terre ne soit polluée et qu'on n'ait plus le manioc comme avant.
Studies have been carried out on the health and environmental damage caused by gas flaring. We showed footage of the flares in Congo to environmental lawyer Peter Roderick.
It's well understood that gas flaring causes acid rain. The US government has accepted it, and there isn't any controversy about that. And that, of course, affects the local environment. It affects the streams, freshwater streams.
Ce n'est plus une source d'eau potable. Regardez un peu.
The villagers told us their only source of drinking water is so polluted it makes them ill. They blame the flares.
You can see that this is the gas isn't being completely burned off, so it's coming in a lot of black smoke. The people who live nearby will be affected by the air pollution, and the acid rain, and all the various sort of toxic cocktail that's contained within the flares. In the developed world, politicians have basically made companies use the gas. There's always some flaring going on, but basically it's a very small percentage, generally, with some exceptions. So you need, in the absence of strong politicians who have got the interests of their country at stake, unfortunately, the companies will do whatever they can do, and what's cheapest for them to get the oil out and get it shipped away.
Ici, nous n'avons rien, nous gagnons rien. On ne voit pas, on ne sait pas là où vend cet argent de pétrole. On ne sait pas. Parce que là où, déjà dans la zone où on exploite le pétrole, il n'y a rien.
Du coup, le pétrole ne bénéficie que d'une certaine catégorie de gens pour le Congo. Nous, natifs de Ndjeno, nous plaignons de ça. Mais actuellement, là, c'est l'affaire de tous les Congolais.
The government has promised its people it will open the books and use the oil revenues to improve their lives. And yet the state oil company, the SNPC, is still withholding vital documents. Nearly 1 million barrels of oil, worth $48 million, were sold in February this year, and neither the SNPC nor the Treasury have credited the money to the state.
Ces réformes sont entreprises trop lentement, ça il faut le reconnaître. Nous nous posons parfois des questions, nous disons, est-ce que le gouvernement n'a pas seulement pour objectif que, par exemple, d'atteindre le point d'achèvement en ce qui concerne l'annulation de la dette, et c'est pour cette raison qu'il s'est engagé à entreprendre les réformes qui sont plus ou moins conseillées, n'est-ce pas, par des institutions comme le FMI et la Banque mondiale.
In June, the IMF gave Congo yet more money, even though it still hasn't come clean on the oil finances. We approached the IMF to discuss its policy regarding Congo-Brazzaville, but were turned down. President Sassou Nguesso may be getting his way in Washington, but in France, lawyers have set out to seize what they claim are his ill-gotten gains.
J'ai déposé plainte en 2007 pour recel de détournement d'argent public. Il y a une enquête de police qui a été ordonnée et qui a donné des résultats absolument spectaculaires.
The police investigation uncovered 23 properties in some of the wealthiest parts of Paris and 112 bank accounts belonging to the Sassou Nguesso family.
Ce patrimoine immobilier en France n'a pas pu être acquis par les salaires. En ne pouvant pas ignorer que les conditions dans lesquelles ils ont acquis ces biens, dans lesquelles ils en profitent, sont évidemment non seulement contraires à la morale, mais contraires au droit français et au droit international. C'est la première fois, je crois, en France, en Europe et je crois dans le monde, où un juge d'instruction dit qu'il y a matière, qu'il est justifié d'enquêter sur des détournements d'argent public commis par des chefs d'État en exercice.
During a state visit to France, President Sassou Nguesso responded. All the leaders of the world have castles and palaces in France, whether they're from the Gulf, Europe or Africa. Amid accusations of electoral fraud, Denis Sassou Nguesso won July's election overwhelmingly, and another 7 years of total control. Despite all the evidence of the misappropriation and waste, Western governments and institutions continue to offer him a helping hand.
Mais le pétrole aussi doit aider les populations. Cet argent doit peut-être contribuer à l'évolution d'un pays et non détruire un pays. Nous voulons que notre pays se développe. Donc nous voulons que ces exploitations amènent au contraire la lumière et non faire vivre les gens dans l'obscurité.
We requested an interview with President Sassou Nguesso. The request was refused. That's it for this edition of People in Power. If you'd like to comment on our programme or anything else, we'd love to hear from you on aljazeera.net/English. Until next time, bye-bye.